I was starting to go to college. I was 19. I was going to Northern Illinois University. Um, kind of made the mistake of rooming with my best friend, and just never attended class. I was more interested in the party atmosphere, and ended up getting kicked out. So my mother gave me an ultimatum. It was like, you either stay home, community college, get a job. That didn't seem appealing to me at the time, but my roommate, he ended up getting kicked out too. And he
Mm.
joined the military maybe 3 months before I did. And, I talked to the recruiters that he had, but he was going infantry, didn't want to go infantry. So I decided to go to the recruiting station to see what was there.
Mm.
Uh, One thing that popped out was combat engineer. And the description for combat engineer was um, building fortifications and destroying minefields.
Wow.
So, I mean, that seemed simple enough. And, but later on, that would change as I joined the military when the Iraq War was going on. So yeah, I decided to go basic training the summer of 2005, and that's how it all started.
Wow. But was it, I guess, scary to join the military? Like, I guess the military was not really something you wanted to do when you're like 10, 11, even like in school. Just kind of, it seems like it was somewhat forced upon you as an option, to, I guess, a way of life.
No, ever since I was little, I always told myself I would never join the military, but I
Mhm.
always wanted to represent my country in some sort of way. So I got into sports, played basketball most of my life, and I was fortunate enough to represent the U.S. for basketball
Wow.
in the summer of 2004 for a short time. I went to Australia and played there for a little bit, and but yeah, no, military was far from my mind, and
Mhm.
but like when you go to college, they say you put on like the freshman 15 or whatever. And but not me, I put on, geez, I put an enormous amount of weight. I think it was maybe like 50 pounds.
Wow.
So when I joined the military, I was 6'3", 270. And that's for a 19-year-old, that's not good. For a 19-year-old, you had to be, for 6'3", you had to be 180 pounds.
Wow.
uh, I was like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm ever going to do that. But in basic training, I ended up losing about 60 pounds
Mm.
during that 16-week span. And so, yeah, I was maybe down to like 215 or something like that. But I was still considered overweight to
Mm.
military standards. But then um, I just started, working out even more. I got down to 200 pounds. That's like the lowest I could get. Otherwise, I was very frail and thin. I'm like,
Mhm.
there's no way I could get to 180. But I was still considered overweight. But then I think there's like an age bracket. So when you hit like 2021, it jumps up to like 200 pounds. So I was able to get into that limit, but yeah, it was still a struggle for me definitely in basic training, since being the bigger guy, you
Mhm.
get picked on, especially by the drill sergeants. But it really didn't bother me all that much because I've played sports all my life. I'm used to coaches yelling in my face. And the whole drill sergeant thing, I mean, it was tough, but it didn't bother me as much as some of the other guys. But that was just experience that I had.
Wow. That is news to me. I'm quite shocked that they actually have like a weight restriction based off your height, because you watch a lot of movies, and that's where I get my experience from the military. Really, you watch all these movies and you see like bigger guys, and they're in combat, they're in infantry, everything like that, and they're going around and they're fine. And
Mhm.
now hearing this is just like, well, no, it's not. That's not true, which makes sense, but it doesn't make sense because honestly, it should be based off of your physical attributes. Or if you're able to do those drills, and you being doing the sports, doing all that, I'm pretty sure you're able to do everything. They just felt like you're overweight, which is kind of
Yeah.
ridiculous.
So if you're overweight, they do give you like the tape test. So they
Mm.
measure your body and everything. And I passed that. But I mean, I had a guy who was maybe 6'1". He was ripped. I mean, he had maybe like 5% body fat, and he
Mm.
was considered overweight because he was like 230. 225, 230, but he was ripped.
Yeah.
And so give him the tape test, and they're like, "Oh no, you're good." Well, obviously he's good. The guy's jacked beyond belief, but they're still considered overweight.
Wow. That is interesting. That is very interesting. I this is why I love doing podcasts and interviewing just random people. To tell the truth, is just you learn something new each day, so it's kind of cool. Um, so you're in the military now. How was it overall?
Um, Basic training was rough. Like I
Mhm.
said, being overweight, it wasn't maybe like the first 4 weeks was pretty much hell for me because it was constant moving, marching drills, ruck marches. Like my body couldn't take it. By that fourth week, that's when we started getting like weapons training. But then I also was noticing like the weight was just falling off of me, and it got easier and easier.
Mhm.
Um, and ended up graduating. So uh, before we joined, they ask you where do you want to go. Um, I picked Germany was my number one choice. I have family from Germany, and I was there. I vacationed there when I was younger, so I'm like, you know what? Why don't I just go over there? It's a way for me to get away from everything, and
Mhm.
so that was my request that got accepted. So I ended up going to Schweinfurt, Germany. It's a little small town, about an hour and a half east of Frankfurt. Um, it's where Hitler had his private airfield and
Mhm.
had his Panzer division. It's in the middle of the woods, so all the bunkers are under the trees. His private airfield actually could be flooded, so you couldn't see it was there. It
Mhm.
wasn't captured until after the war actually ended. So it was one of his last strongholds. But yeah, we lived in German barracks. So it was a culture shock for me too. I lived there for about 3 years,
Mhm.
but I enjoyed it. It almost feels like you're deployed because you're away from the U.S. So it was also the culture was changing too here in the US. This is like around 2005, 2006. So that's when like Twitter, YouTube, and
Mhm.
the iPhones were coming out. So I had like communication was very slim. Like, what was it? Skype was barely coming out where we could actually talk to people overseas rather than being on the phone. Um, so yeah, I kind of missed all that. And it was kind of like the culture passed over me. I had no idea what any of those things were.
Mhm.
But yeah, just the big culture of it was different.
That's very interesting. I honestly, I didn't. I love this conversation. I'm learning something like each and every day. I didn't really think about that, about the technology advancement when you're in the military. It's almost seems like, it's no offense to people that are in there, it's almost like jail, in which you just have like a pause in society, and they're just throwing out, well, these are the tools that you're able to use, and then when you re-enter society back in, it's just like, oh, things are way different than what you thought it was.
So when you're in theater, so like Afghanistan, Iraq, or everywhere, um, you don't get the regular channels. Well, sorry, not, you do get regular channels, but um, the network is different. It's the Armed Forces network,
Mhm.
and it's only Armed Forces commercials. You
Oh,
don't get car commercials, you don't get insurance commercials, beer
yeah.
commercials, anything like that. So literally for 5 years, I've seen the same 10 commercials the entire time because they play those in Germany as well. We didn't
Mhm.
have any of that. We would have ESPN and like Comedy Central and things like that, the regular channels, but the commercials, no. So
Mhm.
even advertisements were were non-existent. So when I would come home, I wouldn't know what this was or what that was. There
Mhm.
is, like you said, it is like being in jail because you're
Yeah.
away from culture. Um, but yeah, it's something that's really completely different.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. Um, 2010, if I'm not mistaken, what happened there?
That's when I left the military.
Mhm.
Um, I did my two tours during my time. I always told myself that I would never get married in the military because I
Mhm.
saw what was happening with families. um, saying goodbye to them. I never wanted to do that to my kids or anything. It just was like heartbreaking. Even when I was like 19, 20, it was heartbreaking. I could never do that to my family. But yeah, my life was changing. The military was changing. So I said I needed to get out because it's not going for my values
Mhm.
or what I believe the military should be. So that's when I ended up leaving.
Wow. Was it easy to leave, or was there like a lot of paperwork, or you have to have a valid reason to leave the military?
Well, you have your contract,
Mhm.
but if your unit is going on deployment and you're being caught in that time frame of when you're going to leave, it's called stop loss. The military could literally stop your time and make you go on the deployment so you actually go longer than your contract. A lot of guys get stuck in that loophole.
Wow.
And yeah, because they would end up leaving during the middle of the deployment. So like, no, you have to stay for that deployment.
Mhm.
Um, I never had that happen to me. It was just certain things were going on while I was in. I was um, up for promotion for like a leadership positions. I didn't want to do them. I flat out said I don't want to do these because I plan on leaving. I don't want to waste my time or waste the military's time to do that, and I was frowned upon a lot by a lot of people for that.
Mhm.
I got ostracized by a lot of the leadership, and I was fortunate enough to talk with one of them and knew people. You know, hey, send me back to where I originally was because I switched positions, and they took me in, and I was forever grateful for that. Um, they understood what I wanted to do. This was my last tour, and I was going to leave, and they accepted that. But I told them I'm going to give 100%. I'm not going to
Mhm.
slack or anything like that. You have my full commitment until I leave. And they're like, all right. So then, yeah, after the deployment, I left a couple months later and came back home.
That's good. That's good. With all this being said, you decide to write a book. You mentioned earlier that you're going through things, I guess, based off the military experience itself, or I guess how you're treated in the military. What is your book about, and what's the title?
It's called A Bomb Hunter Story: My Life
Mhm.
Clearing the Roads of Iraq. Um, as I said before, we were combat engineers, and I gave the description of what we did. When the Iraq War started, that description changed. The main it wasn't it wasn't minefields anymore. It was these roadside bombs that were going on. And since we knew explosives, the military decided that we would be the ones to go find them because we knew what to look for.
Mhm.
So what we did was we had we had up armored vehicles, but I mean they weren't unpenetrable. Uh, we would go 5 miles an hour down the road, 8 hours, 12 hours a day, looking for these IEDs, and that was what our job was for 15 months, 12 months.
Wow.
Um, and uh, my first deployment, we ended up finding 126 IEDs, and
Wow.
that's not including the ones that are fake or the ones that have blown up on us. Um, and during my time, we lost a few soldiers,
Mhm.
um, and numerous more were injured. So I talk about that in my book. Um, the things we went through, especially the psychological part of it, trying to get through it, being there for each other, trying to figure out what our next move was. And most of the guys that I was with my first deployment, I was on my second deployment. So we all took that experience to make things better, um, to better prepare ourselves because a lot of the times we were the trailblazers for a lot of the stuff. When our first deployment, when new equipment would come in, we were actually the first people that would use that equipment because we were the
Mhm.
ones that were out there. So yeah, my first 15 months was in Baghdad. Uh, it's a completely 180 from my second deployment. We ended up in a town called Hilla, which is maybe about an hour south of Baghdad. It's where um, Saddam had a lot of his mass graves. So the town was completely in rubble.
Yeah.
And after Saddam was thrown out, the people were trying to rebuild it. But uh, good for them on that. And it was made it a lot harder because they were trying to build up the city and not trying to get it destroyed again. So it was a challenge in itself. Um, but yeah, there was just my views were changing on the military. I didn't like how it was going. Um, I mean, I went through Bush and Obama, and they were um, completely different presidents,
Mhm.
and I just did not like where things were going. So I just said, you know what, I got to get out. I'll go
Mhm.
do something else.
Wow, that's intense. Because I'm picturing, I'm not sure if you know, well, a lot of people know like how the railroads were built, and they sent people into like the mountains with like dynamite, and they like run out kind of thing like that. And now you're telling me that to get IEDs, you literally have to drive slowly. Were you driving over IEDs or driving or just going down the road towards IEDs? And to dismantle an IED, it's you got to be very cautious and careful with that stuff. It's I remember seeing like, well, again, just my experience, just movies and TV shows, and it's just the sweating to know that guess what, you got to sacrifice yourself and your platoon just to get rid of bombs. That's very scary.
Um, the ingenuity of a lot of these IEDs were incredible.
Hmm.
A lot of them were disguised. Baghdad is filled with trash. So if you
Hmm.
go down the road, the median is lined with trash. Um, it's sometimes most of the time it'd be hidden in these trash piles. We've even had IEDs in cars, dogs, people,
Oh wow.
um, even molded into the curb. Um, and it got so repetitive that we would memorize these trash piles. And if that trash pile was disturbed in any way, we knew something was there. And
Hmm.
9 times out of 10, it would be something. We would get people that just come on mission up with us just to see how things are. And they're like, oh, let's check this, let's check that, let's check that. It's like, now that trash pile's been like that for the last month. It's not disturbed. And they're like, how do you even know? I'm like, well, we remember these things. It's it's just like dreaming about trash and things that are out of place. That yeah, a lot of the times we would get hit. The things would be hidden so well that you wouldn't see it until the last second.
Hmm.
Um, Me myself, I've been blown up twice, but I've had buddies that have been blown up 3, 4 times. Um, it's just something that came with the job. Um, we 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 had the job, but when the job changed, we kind of just got pushed into it. But a lot of guys just accepted it.
Hmm.
Um, we knew we were making a difference by the changes that were going on, and that just kept us going. That drive,
Yeah.
and uh, we just knew that we were making uh, things safer for us and for other soldiers.
Wow. Wow. I don't know what to say, but biggest thing is like I'm very proud of you because it's not something easy to do. Because it's life-changing experience to go through that. And I've read Tom Clancy, and I know he's done a lot of books on war, on and those I guess those outings. I'm not sure the right terms for it. Like going like doing Baghdad, doing like just those bad parts, I guess the Middle East and so on and so forth. And you read about it, but at the same time, you always think, well, is it really true? Is it really not true? And then now hearing it from you, you realize that yes, there is some truth into those books. But the biggest thing is, and the biggest word in all this is really a sacrifice. Um, the fact that you did it so calmly and just said you got blown up twice. I'm just like, I if I got blown up once, I'm like, yeah, I'm done. But hopefully you have not suffered any injuries because of it. Hopefully, as you mentioned though, like you probably seen a few of your unfortunately your troops passed away due to those injuries and events that have happened. And I understand why you have left in regards to it. I'm pretty sure you're probably suffering from some post-traumatic stress in regards to that, those nightmares and so on and so forth. How do you combat with all of that?
Yeah, like you said, I guess a lot of people say like I'm so calm about it. Um, it's almost like a psychological thing that we had to do.
Mhm,
Um, it would get to a point where if we did get blown up, we would laugh about it afterwards.
mhm,
As crazy as that sounds, that's how we got through it. That's how we helped each other get through it. It got to a point where we were talking about, oh, you remember when you got blown up? You're like, well, which one? I don't remember that. We have to be specific on which event it is. And
right,
we would laugh about it. I know I write an incident in my book when I got blown up the first time. I needed to go back out right away. I could not sit. I could not um, dwell on it. I needed to go back out there because if I didn't, uh, I probably would just be scared out of my mind to
mhm,
even go out there. Um, but that's something that we had to do. We'd go right back out there. That's something that we had to get through. It is um, tough, especially coming back. Um, I write about different incidences in my book about the times we lost soldiers and what we had to deal with.
mhm,
And I struggled with that a lot. Nightmares every day. Um, I knew I didn't regret anything, but there was always be that lingering thing in the back of your mind if you could have done something else. But I always tell myself I couldn't do anything better than what I did. Um, and then after I kept actually kept a lot, I kept a lot of those stories in me and never said anything. People knew what I did
mhm,
or what we did, and but I never gave specifics about anything. It wasn't until I wrote my book people actually s- saw how intense it actually was and what we did. Um, and after writing it, I left everything on the pages, left all my emotions on it, so I don't have to carry it anymore. I don't
mhm.
have to hold it in. If people want to know about it, it's there. I don't have to tell the story, even though I'm comfortable talking about it. It's there. I don't have to hold that story in anymore. And that's what made things 100 times better for me. I don't have nightmares anymore. Um, I'm more at peace with myself.
That's really good. That is very good. And I'd like to touch base on it. You mentioned culture shock, and if you don't mind me asking, talk, talk about that. What kind of culture shock that you actually ran into? You mentioned different cars, phones were different. Um, Family was probably huge. You might have missed a lot of important events for family members as well. Um, how did you cope with all that?
I think what helped me most was um, me actually being away from home.
Mm,
Um, I attended like sports camps. I've been on vacations for long periods of time, so being separated from family that's half the battle. A lot
mm,
of guys never went outside their small town. Um, for me, basic training was fine, but a lot of guys, it was a culture shock for them being away from home. Sometimes guys would be the first time they ever see an a Hispanic guy or a
mm,
black guy or even a white guy. And there was some hostility sometimes, but if the drill sergeants found out about any of that, they would bunk you with whoever you didn't like. They would get that out of you right away.
mm,
Um, if you were uncomfortable showering in front of guys, they would shove us all in there naked in this little shower and make you comfortable. Um, they would get it out of you because there's no room for any of that.
mm,
And a lot of guys, first time being away from home, those first 2 days, they're in a corner, like some guys crying because they've never been away from home. So yeah, that just Me being in a big city, I mean, it's not a culture shock for me, but I mean, some guys really took it hard. Um, but it was an experience, and it's
Yeah.
just being able to view how other people um, lived was also another thing. Um, I did not realize. I think I finally realized that after I left the military. Um, in Chicago, we have two VA hospitals, and but some of these guys are from little towns. Their closest VA hospital might be 2, 3 hours away,
Yeah.
and or a resource center for anything might be 2, 3, 4 hours away. Me being in the big city, these resources are available, but you have to find them. Um, so yeah, it didn't hit me until after I left the military about what certain guys go through.
Mhm. You mentioned not being you don't want to get married while being in the military. If you don't mind me asking, are you married now or single?
When I left, I got married.
Oh,
I
that's
was
good.
I was married for um, 12 years, and
Yeah.
then when I had my breakdown, um, I kind of saw things more clearly, um, and I didn't like the place I was in. I ended up getting divorced, um, but I'm better for it now. I'm in a much better place. My mind is more clear now. I don't rely on a lot of things. Alcohol is another thing. I don't do that anymore either. So it's um, it for 10 years. It was just something that built up,
Yeah.
and I just couldn't take it anymore, I guess. And for the last, I've been healing for the last 2 years now. I will continue to heal. So, but I'm better for it now.
I absolutely love what I'm hearing, and I say that you go through a psychological shock
Mhm.
when you're in the military because they're trying to prepare you for, I guess, worse of the worst, but they don't prepare you for when you leave the military.
No.
And I think that is what you really went through. And at the same time, I'm pretty sure your book touched base on that as well. So saying all that, what would your advice be for those leaving the military, knowing that you're not prepared to go back into society?
If you ever plan on leaving, you have to have a plan. If you do not have a plan, it will go downhill from day one.
Mm,
Um, when I left, I wanted to join the Chicago Police Department. Um, I ended up going, and I got denied for different reasons. My hearing is one of them. I tried to apply for TSA when I came out. I got denied because my hearing, and I actually hit a roadblock. I didn't have a plan after that. My plans were gone. So what I was doing was just odd jobs, and uh, I decided to go back to school. The military paid for my degree. Decided to go back, and I got my degree in 3.5 years.
mm,
Um, and uh, I don't regret it. But you have to have a plan. If you, yeah, that's the number one thing. You have to have some kind of plan in order to, unless you have a job in the military that could transfer over swiftly, you have a better chance. Me
mhm.
was finding explosives. There's not many jobs where I could deal with explosives and everything like that. But at the same time, I did not. I'm kind of glad that I didn't join the police department or get into any of that other things because I didn't want to put my family through if I was coming back or worrying about me while I was gone. Um, while I was in, I rarely talked to family back home. I might have talked to my mom maybe every 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Um, and if it was ever before that, my mom would always think, "Oh, something must have happened," or it was just, um, yeah, it was just if you don't hear from me, don't worry about it.
Mhm.
I will let you know if something happens. And sometimes things would happen, and then I would tell them, "Hey, I can't talk to you for maybe about a week, so don't worry about anything, or I would contact somebody and say, hey, I can't call anybody, tell everybody I can't contact you. Um, and yeah, just that psychological thing is huge. And it kind of helps me now because I don't know, our unit, we dealt with so many life and death situations.
Mhm.
I've gotten to a point, if I'm in a situation, I don't find it as big of a deal as it should be. I always say, like, well, no one's dying, in a kind of messed up way of thinking. Well, no one's dying, so the situation ain't that bad, even though
Yeah.
it might be a bad situation. I just have that backwards thinking of, you know what, it's gonna be fine. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. It's tough. And I wish military trained you on that, on how to re-enter society. It's similar, well, not similar, but it's those things that I think society in that aspect we miss out on a lot. Because I'm glad you mentioned the police, going to the police force, because honestly, I think that's what a lot of people feel like after the military. When you're finished, then you automatically go and become a police officer, or you automatically go in these directions. But at the same time, there's rules, and I say that, and again, this is just my minimum knowledge of the military. Um, there's the aspect of, I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, where the military is really, this is the job, do whatever you can to get the job done. And then you go into society, i.e., the police force, get the job done, but these are the rules that you have to follow because one, you're representing the society in a sense, versus in a war aspect of things, you're just doing it to serve the greater good, which might difference in a way.
Yeah, in a way, but the military has way more rules.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
like I said, I was under Bush and I was under
Mm.
Obama.
Mm.
The rules completely changed when Obama was in office.
Mm.
It was to a point where um, guys were getting in trouble a lot for minimal things.
Mm.
Um, I'm a bigger guy, so for our convoys, I was always the gunners on the vehicles. I dealt with the heavy heavy weapons. So I was always my job was always to protect our convoy.
Mm.
Um, and under Bush, it was more. I mean, there were rules of engagement, but it was lenient on
Mm.
the gunners. When Obama was around, they held us accountable for anything. There was a point in my book where I talk about I almost got court-martialed because
Wow.
I fired a warning shot at a guy that was coming too close,
Mm-hmm.
and I got reamed for it.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, I don't care. I'm gonna protect us. If you got a problem with that, then you might have to answer for it as well. But during my second deployment, it was every couple of weeks, some gunner was getting court-martialed or something because of thing that I did.
Mm.
And I just couldn't deal with that. I mean, it it almost felt to a point where we actually had to get on the phone with Obama and ask him if it was okay if we could shoot somebody. It got to that point,
Wow.
and there's so many steps that you have to do in that rules of engagement. Like you can't memorize it all,
Mm.
and also doing all those steps. By the time that person is engaging you or whatever, it could be too late.
True.
Um,
Yep.
and like guys would get in trouble for because they missed the step. Like, okay, what I missed the damn step? Who cares about it? I can't deal with that in that high tense situation. That's one of the reasons why I have to leave. I cannot do this. I
Mm.
I, I might have got lucky this time, but the next time I probably will get in big trouble, and I don't want to be in any situation like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you on that aspect. Um, and I'm glad you said like it. You're, and I look at, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes or anyone's shoes in that. If someone's running after you, especially when you're in foreign land, and you feel like, and sad to say, mostly everyone you look at is a threat, and someone's run towards you, yeah, you fire off the warning shot. But to get in trouble for that, I disagree with that aspect of things. That warning shot, that person could be a suicide bomber. You don't know what that person's carrying. If it's not on them, it could be inside them, in all honesty. You don't know, right?
We dealt with an enemy that didn't have a uniform,
Mm-hmm.
so never knew who it was. I have I have uncles that were in Vietnam. They say I'd rather go back to Vietnam than go to Iraq. Screw
Oh,
that.
wow.
He's like,
Yeah, it's true.
I'd rather deal with the jungle than have to deal with you deal with. And I tell him, well, I'd rather be in Iraq than in Vietnam. I don't want to get bit by some random thing and then I end up dead. It's just like a funny back and forth that we would always have about it. Just like
Mm-hmm.
both situations are terrible, but we don't want to be in the other one situation. Um, but yeah, it's just like that. Yeah, there's a lot more rules in the military than you would think there are in the civilian life, especially jobs being a police officer or a
Yeah.
fireman or something like
Mm.
that. Yeah, it just that was another thing. The rules, how things had to be. Um, Perfection was demanded, and that was rough for the first 2 years for me because
Mm-hmm.
when in the military, if you fuck up, they will put you in a position where you will not fuck up again. Um, you'll be out of sight, out of mind. You can't do that here. If you do that here at a job, then that's a lawsuit or whatever. Um, so when I would come back and I would see someone like do like a stupid thing, I would be real like the grumpy old man, like, why the hell are you doing that? It took me a long time to realize that I need to calm myself down. Not every perfection is not demanded, and yeah, that's another culture shock that I had to go through.
Yeah. You must also get those trigger warnings every now and then. If you're like, I guess when you first came back, possibly when grocery stores, if something fell or a noise that reminds you of where you were before, that must have been painful as well. Because again, going through that post-traumatic stress, it triggers you. It again, that whole psychological aspect of being in the military, being in the army, um, it's not easy. And honestly, it's not for everyone. You really have to really turn off a lot of switches, get in there, be in quotation robotic, do your job, and then at the end of the day, leave all that. Like when you're coming back home, leave all that and re-enter society normal.
When I would come back during my time, I couldn't drive.
Mhm.
Um, I would just be in a panic all the time. So I would either have someone drive me somewhere or I would walk. And if someone did drive me, I wouldn't even look at the road.
Mhm.
Everything, people being close, cars being close. It was just, I mean, I even remember I was coming back. It was late at night. I was on a highway and there was a trash bag on the side of the road. I literally veered over all the way to the left just to avoid it because I was going what, 50 miles an hour or something like that on the highway. I literally veered to the left without any regard if there was any other cars. It was just my safety. And it was just, I couldn't do that. That took a while too. Driving by myself took a while. Um, Even when I was coming back, I was driving 5 miles an hour or 10 miles an hour. It was just getting back into the groove. It did take a while, but yeah, it really did take a while for. I mean, even today, I still have quirks that
Mhm.
I can't deal with. I can't have. I can't wear a shirt and tie. Um, the gear that I would have to wear as a gunner um, was always constraining around my neck, around my chest. Um, I would just like burst out in a sweat if I wear a shirt and tie. I could wear collared shirts now, but to a limit. It's still a little psychological thing that I deal with now. But a lot of the other things have passed. But yeah, always still healing.
Mhm. When you left the military, did you feel a weight off your shoulder? Or wasn't until a few years ago when you actually, I guess, felt normal?
A little bit of a weight um, lifted off, but being in the military, everything is so simple.
Mhm.
Um, Coming back, there's like in your everyday life, it's decisions nonstop. In the military, it's a simple thing every day. You go through the same thing every day. It's normalcy. It's repetitive. Coming back, it's different situations. You almost get like I would get frustrated to a point on making decisions. I even got frustrated being at a restaurant with all the choices on the menu.
Mhm.
In the military, it's either this or that one. Um, it had that. I even yelled. I think I yelled at the waitress one time because she kept asking me questions on what I wanted. I'm like, just give me my food. It was it got to that point where I'm just like, uh, getting in that grumpy old man kind of state.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, the a lot of the things went away, like the camaraderie. Like we'd work if we weren't deployed, we do something during the day work wise. Afterwards, guys would get together, they would drink or play video games or play basketball or do something. Um, that camaraderie was gone. And that's why like a lot of guys get out and then they're like, oh, I missed the military. I missed the military.
Yeah.
Well, they actually missed the camaraderie. It's not actually the military. So when they go back, they're like, oh, no, screw this. I didn't miss this at all. But it's just the different aspects that they miss. Um, and a lot of guys have that problem.
Yeah. I now that you think about it, now that I think about it, it makes sense. The people that you with, there's no there's trust. There's a lot of trust that you guys have with each other. You knew who your friends were. Well, you had no choice really, but you
Mhm.
built that trust with each other. You built that support, that friendship. You've been through a lot together, trained together, ate together, slept together, went out on campaigns together, did all that stuff together. And then to get out of it, now you're looking and seeking for that next person, or who else can I trust to have my back, literally have my back.
Mhm.
So it's tough to find those people, and I'm pretty sure you guys probably still stick together, or have meetings or outings together every now and then, just to, like you mentioned, that keyword is that camaraderie. So it's tough to leave it, and it's tough to go into.
Yeah, the technology has helped a lot.
Yeah.
Just being able to pick up a phone and FaceTime or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, the talk every once in a while rather than like sending letters or anything like that. But yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
guys still keep in touch. Some guys are still even in and they're in higher positions, so we talk to them all the time. Um, but yeah, they're friends forever.
That's good. You mentioned your book earlier. Where can we read it, or where can we purchase it?
It's on Amazon,
Mhm.
so it's on Kindle and then on paperback too as well.
Excellent. And sorry, the name of it again?
Bomb Hunter Story: My Life Clearing the Roads of Iraq.
Excellent. Excellent. Eric, it's been a pleasure talking to you in regards to one, big shout out to the military again, everything that you've done, everything that you've accomplished, everything that you've really sacrificed to have peace, uh, um, in what we consider peace, to be honest. Um, to tell your experience, and I always mention to everyone that I talk to, it's not a story, it really is an experience, because you've lived it. There's no changing of it.
Mhm.
The third thing is anything that you like to say, that I missed out on, or anything that you like to share.
No, so yeah, now I have my regular job, but I have a military Humvee that I take to car shows,
Oh,
um,
sweet.
and it's my way of giving back. I always run into veterans, um, and we talk. That's my way of giving back, helping other guys out, being able to talk through it. I mean, some guys have different things they're into, but in any way that I could help or give back, um, that's what I do now. And I also do TikTok too, so I have my own. page on TikTok that I do military videos on. I have the Humvee. It's at Sapper 720.
Okay.
So yeah, they do military jokes and explain things, how things work in the military, and if people have any questions.
That is excellent. I love that. Again, the biggest thing is it's you have to give back to the community, give back to society, because despite you, it's that part of that service, right? That
Mhm.
servitude of you, one, sacrificing your body for to save, or I guess for the greater good. And then now that you're done, it's not you're not done serving yet. It's going back and then now re-entering society and saying, hey, guess what? This is what the military is about. But let me help you paint the picture, the real picture of what the military is about. Let me use my time to be able to give back to the community in a safe way and not in a dangerous way. Let me educate them. Let me be a friend to them. So I'm very glad that you are doing that.
No, yeah. Thanks for giving me the platform to talk about it.